Hi everyone, welcome back to a Handmade Journal. I'm Heather, and this is my YouTube channel where I am currently documenting all of my handmade sewing and knitting makes for my 90-day wardrobe challenge. A challenge that I decided I needed to have in order to kind of kickstart my sewing, my sojo or my sewing practice in this time of my life. I am about ready to turn 50, and I didn't want to just be like idle with my 50-ishness and start kind of losing the things that I've enjoyed about life. And to me, that's been a lot of learning new hobbies and skills and things like that. So as I've been going through this process, something that's been on my mind is when someone finds out that I sew, and I don't actively go out and say, hey, I made this, or, oh yeah, I sew my own clothes. It's actually kind of almost more enjoyable to me when I'll get a compliment about something, and in my mind I know, hey, I made this. But without actually sharing that I actually made it. To me, that's just kind of the fun of it. But there are people out there, family and some friends that do know I sew. And there'll be times when people, and maybe it's even sometimes once in a while a stranger, but there'll be times when people will say, hey, can you make this for me? Or can you do this? Or that, related to time that I would need to spend making them something. And for a very, very long time, I generally would gracefully backpedal from either having to answer that question, or I would just, flat out say, no, I don't have the time, or, oh, maybe you could go to the tailor and they would do a much better job, or, things of that nature. But I did have a situation come up just recently. So I was wearing a version of this outfit. I made the Collins dress by Friday Pattern Company. It was a really quick, easy make. It looked really good. I enjoyed wearing it. I got a lot of compliments. And then I have a relative that said, oh, can you make me one? Or actually, no, it was something like, are we all getting those for Christmas? Kind of thing. And she's mentioned before wanting to have things made for her. And that's kind of a side point. That's just her. That's her personality. She's younger. She doesn't understand the time it would take to actually make something. But for me, my time is actually more valuable than money. I would much rather just spend the money to go buy, a similar dress if there was one, or just clothes in general for someone, rather than spending the time to actually make something for them. And there's a lot of reasons for that besides my time being so valuable to me. But I feel like when I am making something, I'm pouring little bits of myself into it, whether a lot of times it's love, it might be frustration if things aren't going well. And I don't think that most people can appreciate that. And there's also going to be times when people might receive something that if they were expecting, they had certain expectations and you might not have met them. And I would say this goes for a lot of different hobbies or skills that we may have. We're talking about sewing here because this is a sewing channel. But I've been in business for a lot of years, and I've had people ask me to make them things with the equipment or the people I have in the business. And I've typically just turned that down. I found different ways of getting out of it. But I just wanted to bring it up. I think it's probably something we all run into from time to time. I think there are a lot of us that do make things and are disappointed when the recipient isn't as appreciative as I think they probably should be. I know, for myself, I do sew a little for others. I have made things for other people in the past. I knitted a bunch of scarves when I was first learning to knit scarves back in the day, and gave them to people, and I'm sure they don't have them anymore. I haven't seen them in a long time. Part of it was a practice for me too. And I've gone through and I've made other, one year I made, I think this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, I made little, not hair scrunchies, but little hair ties out of silver elastic. And those were easy to make. It wasn't a big deal, but I don't know how, if people appreciated that. But yeah, so I do sew for my mother, and that's primarily more just straight up hemming her pants and skirts because she's really short. And even though she keeps saying she's a half inch over 5 feet, I don't even think she's 5 feet anymore. I think she's been shrinking. So any ready to wear clothes that she buys are generally going to not fit her right with the length. And so I do without any balking. I even offer, I will do that for her. But I think for most everyone else, there was another situation where I was asked by a relative to show them how to sew because they wanted to make a tablecloth. And I'm sure, like 99% sure that they didn't really want to learn how to sew, but they didn't want to ask me to do it, which was fine. So yeah, we spent a little time. It was the first time that she used a sewing machine. So it was just a little activity we could do. We made a simple little tablecloth, and that was fine. And I'm okay with that. And I have another relative that wants to learn how to sew, and I'd be more than happy to teach her to do that. Sometimes I do feel guilty about saying no when someone asks me to make them something. But I think I need to keep reminding myself that sewing for me is not just about making things that I enjoy over and above and beyond something I could buy in a ready-to-wear sense. But it's my hobby. It's self-care. It's something I do for myself for a variety of different reasons, and I guess I shouldn't feel guilty about that. But I'm curious from all of you, what do you think about, one, the term selfish sewist? Is that even like appropriate to even be saying or thinking? And do you sew for others? I know my aunt, she's very generous. She sews a lot for her family, and I hope they appreciate that, especially if they're watching right now. They recently discovered, my aunt recently discovered my YouTube channel. I hadn't actually told anyone about it, and so that was really fun that our interests collided in that sense. She mostly does quilting and home projects. But anyway, I think, for a lot of us that this is something that comes up. I'd be curious what your thoughts are on the subject. So thanks for indulging me on this little hot take, I guess. And I'll see you next week. Bye.